to the stage.
Hey, y'all. Wow. So, I'm really excited to be here today. And for it to be Housing Works, right? It's not just some random bookstore. It's a space and a place that is deeply connected, right? And deeply rooted. And that really matters to me. Um, I've been in New York for the past couple of days now, and it's eaten my phone so far. Y'all, it's just been wild this past couple of days. And so I am going to read a bit from the very first chapter of the book. Chapter 1, titled All of Us, All of Us or None of Us. And it starts with a quote from the Combahee River Collective, where they say, "This focusing upon our own oppression is embodied in the concept of identity politics. We believe that the most profound and potentially most radical politics come directly out of our own identity. If Black women were free, it would mean that everyone else would have to be free, since our freedom would necessitate the destruction of all systems of oppression." Combahee River Collective, 1977. Nothing brings out the true colors of people in the United States as effectively or honestly as a presidential election. The best and worst of humanity have a way of showing themselves in a never-ending cycle. Of course, we know that candidates will say and do almost anything to win. We also know that every 4 years, Democrats and Republicans raise astronomical amounts of money to spend on consultants, ads, field operations, hats, yard signs, data analysis, direct voter outreach, and a host of other things. Candidates visit churches, host rallies, kiss babies, and eat fried chicken, which they hope demonstrates that they understand what people care about. And though this performance helps them raise money, it is all ultimately to win on Election Day. Campaign strategists make choices about which groups will amass the most money and best serve their interests, and consider which messages will resonate most. The 2016 presidential election campaigns were a prime example of how the messages matter. Unsurprisingly, just what groups were targeted and the message they received are at the center of the debate of why Hillary Clinton, whose party, campaign committee, and supporting super PACs raised about $1.2 billion and lost the election to an opponent. Republican Donald Trump, with less money, multiple accusations of sexual assault, and no experience as an elected official or public servant. Regardless of what news media you read and watched, the chatter predicted a Clinton victory. Polar data darling Nate Silver predicted that Clinton would win in a landslide. She was pro-choice and backed by a host of major feminist organizations, labor unions, and mainstream progressive organizations. White women were an assumed constituency. First Lady Michelle Obama even hit the campaign trail to support Clinton, while President Barack Obama ventured that it would be a, quote, personal insult if Black voters did not turn out and vote for Clinton. As we know now, she won the Black vote and the popular vote and lost in the Electoral College. I was among those who were fooled into believing that this country would never elect a racist billionaire who had multiple accusations of rape and no experience as a public servant. Many comrades and I were readying ourselves to finally take up a real fight with the Democratic Party, with the Obama administration leaving. When I awoke at 2:30 a.m. to learn that Clinton had lost the election, I was not alone in my shock or profound lack of understanding of what had happened. Everyone, pundits, progressives, and countless ordinary people sought to understand who and what was to blame for Clinton's loss. Unsurprisingly, what surfaced was typical of the so-called American left. In no more than 2 days after the election, the, quote, failure of identity politics articles started to roll out. Identity politics entails stances and actions based on people's identification along lines of race, gender, class, religion, disability, and other lived experiences. Oddly, but intentionally enough, the identities these articles targeted as divisive matched up well with the groups Trump's campaign targeted: women, Muslims, and black and brown people. And I'll stop there.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Hello, everybody. My name is Glory. I'm really excited to be here with Charlene for so many reasons. Well, first of all, I loved your book.
Thank you.
Like, without question, I felt like it was just like a clear, accessible space for whether you're 5 or 35, you can pick up this book and understand what it means to really want Black liberation. So thank you for creating something for us to really hold on to and keep close. And then also, you know, with our organization, your book is our September book.
Yay!
Yes. So everyone is invited to the book club. Y'all come on through. We're going to have Charlene in conversation on September 8th. Each month we always have a debut author, so we're so excited to have you as our first fall selection for 2018.
Thank you.
There's just so much to unpack here, given that you know, the opening you just read. You know, we're looking at politics, we're looking at identity, there's patriarchy, Black feminism, and I think I want to go to the very beginning of your journey and look at exactly, you know, what were your first political lessons and what led you to the space where you could even write this book?
Yeah. So first, thank you
Yes,
for all of your support. It's been amazing. I'm
Thank
like
you.
super grateful. So thank you. And that's like a part of my journey, is showing gratitude to the Black women who have saved my life over and over again.
Yes.
Alexis Pauline Gumbs talks about Black feminist texts as sacred.
Yes.
And I really think of like my journey into radical Black feminism as like a spiritual journey.
Right.
And I grew up on the south side of Chicago. My parents are both children of Black women who migrated from Mississippi during the Great Migration. And from a very early age, they had like 2 things. They're like, this is what you need to do.
Right.
You need to respect all people, no matter who they were and where they came from. Because I grew up in the back of the yards until I was about 14.
Okay.
And so that was a predominantly immigrant Mexican-American neighborhood.
Okay.
And so we were the only Black folks on my block. And they just wanted to instill that in us very early. And they were like, get a good education.
Right.
And I learned much later that just getting a good education is not guaranteed for little Black girls from the south side of Chicago. At the same time, I had access to excellent public schools. I am a graduate of Chicago public schools. They are largely responsible, or in many ways responsible, for what you see today, so blame it on them if you have any issues. But I had a great education. But it wasn't until like my senior year in college that I even had a Black feminist professor, or even knew a person who called themselves a Black feminist. And her name is Dr. Venus Evans Winters. She is a professor at Illinois State now. And, you know, I was always super conscious of being Black.
Right.
Right? Like I knew that. But it wasn't until later where I started to think about what it meant to be Black and woman, what it meant to be Black, woman, and queer, all of those things. And so just as much as this book is like about my journey as an organizer, it's also about how I've developed my own politics and my own personal experiences. I grew up in a family that could best be described as working class. It's kind of weird. I'm like, what do I call us? I'm not sure, because we weren't middle class, that's for sure. But, you know, I had a roof over my head and all those good things. And so when I set out to write Unapologetic about 4 years ago, I didn't want to write a memoir. This is not my memoir. You're not finna get all the tea. So
That's coming next.
One day, you're not finna get all the tea. It is also not like a comprehensive history of BYP 100. I don't think I'm the person to write that book. I'm too close to the thing.
Well, if folks don't know, can you explain what BYP 100 is?
Yeah. So BYP 100 is the organization that I help create and build. It stands for Black Youth Project 100. Yep. We started 5 years ago. Some of our members are here.
Hey!
You know, we roll deep everywhere. You can't go anywhere where people are talking about Black feminism and not see one of our members. It's kind of wild.
I love that.
Anywhere in the country, pretty much. And so it's not that, but I wanted to create something that I wish I had when I was 18 years old. And got involved in activism and then community organizing. I didn't know a thing. Actually, one of the people who I got my first community organizing experience with is in this room. It's always weird. I just go places. I'm like, why do I know all these people?
Well, I feel like we need to call them out.
It's Emily over here from St. Louis.
Stand up. Let's do a clap. Let's do a clap. Thank you, Emily.
So embarrassed. But I wish I had a book like this when I got started. Something that laid out to me core history, core concepts, theory, and practices about organizing and movement building.
And that leads me to my second question. So the definition of Black queer feminist lens, from the first chapter, you open up with that and you give us a clear definition of what that means, what that organizational framework is. Why did you decide to open with that? And how is that your guiding principle throughout the book?
Yeah, so everything I have in the first chapter was really like, let me hit them with this right now so I don't have to argue with you about identity politics for the rest of the book. I also wanted to lay out both the theoretical and the experiences that I had that served as a basis for the organizing work that I do and the way we do our work in BYP 100, and also to make a clear intervention in how people can approach this work, because that's what our work has been in the past 5 years. It's been about making intervention after intervention in what people think grassroots organizing should be, what people think the Black radical tradition is, what people think the Black liberation movement is about in this particular moment. I wanted to just lay out the stuff. Yeah. And we didn't have, organizationally, one definition of what it means to organize through a Black queer feminist lens. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to move out on faith and hope they don't turn up on me and write a definition, attempt to write a definition. And it's just my definition, right? Okay. It's not the final thing.
So what does that mean, though? So does that mean is it open to interpretation?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so. I mean, a thing doesn't become an ideology or a firm set of values and practices until a lot of people play with it, right? Yeah. Like Karl Marx and Engels, they wrote what they wrote, but it didn't become real until other people started to think about
their iterations,
right?
And
play with it and say, folks like Claudia Jones, who was left of Marx, right? And come in and just chop and screw it and make it even better. Right. That's what we do. That's what we do.
Well, it makes me think of the video you created for the book trailer. You set out these 5 questions that every community organizer or activist should ask themselves and as they embark on their journey. Can you talk about those questions? And can you also, I'm thinking about the book, The Rules of Radicals. Yeah. How you read that, what was the impression it left on you, and how did it transform your ideology?
So, as I mentioned, I grew up in the back of the yards neighborhood. I did not know coming up that Saul Alinsky organized there. Right. I had no idea that, the back of the yards neighborhood council, which is used as an archetype of what community organizing is supposed to be, and Alinsky's method, Alinsky's method is still alive and well in Chicago. Alive, maybe not well. Actually, alive. Not well. Alive. Okay. In Chicago and other parts of the country. And I was actually trained by Alinsky organizers in the IAF. Oh, wow, okay. I got my organizing training with the Industrial Areas Foundation that Alinsky helped found. And so when I read Rules for Radicals, I was like,
switch it up.
Yeah, this is not what we need. And more so than reading, now I got my basic habits and my training and organizing through Alinsky's methods, right? I want to be real clear that in that time, I learned a lot. it taught me the habits that I still hold on to today, like the value of a good relational meeting or a one-on-one, where you're able to identify someone's self-interest, their values, where you share interests and values, and then also discern like how you can work with each other and do things moving forward. And I also was like, I don't want to organize absent of ideology.
Okay.
Like, it actually matters to me what the politics of a situation are, because those are values.
Right.
It's what you care about. Like, that matters to me. And it was also, it was like, actually, I do want to organize within the Black radical tradition. I want to organize with young people, Black and brown folks. I was mostly organizing people twice my age, and I did it.
Yeah.
I did what I needed to do. I met the requirements. You know, I was asked to stay on as an organizer long term, and I decided not to. And so I'm super grateful for what I learned during that time, but it wasn't enough. And so I decided to do something different.
Do you know when that turning point was, when you said this isn't enough, I need to do more for my community?
Oh, I mean, I was organizing in Prince William County in Virginia
Oh, okay.
at the age of 24. And, I mean, I don't even know. I don't know. I can count. One of the times I was in my car crying, I don't know. It was like one of the times, who knows. I found because I drove a lot, like in long distances, pretty much every day, and I was always by myself.
Right.
And I was like, I want to do something different. And so when writing this book, I'm thinking about what would be useful for organizers. Like, what would have been useful for me as an organizer at that time, at 24, getting my training. And so I wrote out these 5 questions. And they actually started as a chapter about what generates movement and what causes atrophy in movement. And it was like a list of things. And then I was like, let me change that around a little bit. And so the first question is the question that we like are able to pull out in one-on-ones or relational meetings, which is, who am I?
Who am I? Yep.
Like, knowing what are my self-interests and what am I best positioned to do. I think it's super important that I have a lot of self-interest in making sure that, or self-interest in the fact that, or making sure that Black trans women have access to healthcare, quality healthcare. But I am not positioned to lead on that issue.
Right.
Black trans women should lead on that issue.
Right. Well, I think that what's so powerful about how you position things, it's like when you talk about self-interest, you're still thinking of collective community and like direct action around that. It is not ego-driven at all. It still has this collective, embodied sense of we're doing this all together.
Yes, yes. And I think it might be in that part where I say, if you hear an organizer talking about I don't do this work for me, I do it for other people, move as far away as you can.
Right.
Because what are you here for?
Right.
These meetings, we have a lot of meetings. And BYP 100, the Movement for Black Lives, I'm on a bunch of those. We have a lot of meetings. And you're going to show up to all these meetings, put your body on the line. Like, I don't know how many times I put my life on the line, and other people who I'm in movement with have put their lives on the line. And it's not about, you don't have any self-interest in this. Then what are you here for?
Right, right. Like, don't pretend to be a martyr.
That martyrdom, it doesn't serve us at all. And so yeah, I think it's really important for people to be clear about who they are, what brings them into the work, and what they're best positioned to do, right? The second question is Ella Baker's question.
Yes.
You know, Ella Baker, triple OG, you know, builder of movements, just like all of the things, would ask the question when she met someone, or she would meet someone, and she would say, like, who are your people? Right? Which is oftentimes why I start with how I talk about who I am. I talk about my parents and where their parents come from.
Yeah.
Because you might be asking, I remember the first time I came to New York and somebody asked me, where are you from? You sound like you're from Alabama. I was like, no, I'm from Chicago. Oh, why you sound like that? Because my people are from Mississippi.
Yeah.
You know, so the way I sound, the food I eat, how I think about the world is so much grounded in the folks who I grew up around, be it the homies on the corner. Like, I was walking through Brooklyn last night off of Puerto Rican Avenue and coming off the train, and I was like, dang, I feel like I'm at home. It just felt like somebody was playing loud music, and it was kind of, you know, but it just felt like I was at home.
Right.
And so, like, who my people are determines, like, how I show up to the work. Like, I remember when I was working on the Our, like doing some stuff for Fight for 15 and supporting the Our Walmart campaign. It's like my mama at the time was working at Walmart So this wasn't some like intellectual exercise for me. I had a deep self-interest in supporting that work, right? The third question is, what do we want? And I think it's super, super important to be clear about what you want. And not just you as an individual, but your organization. And so, what kind of strategies are y'all moving, right? Like, are you trying to tinker around the edges of the system? Are you trying to, uproot the system? Or are you trying to topple the whole thing, right? And replace it with something else? Having a level of clarity around the types of demands that you make. Like, I remember there was this one point early on in BYP 100's organizing history. I mean, we only got 5 years, so all of it's early. But like within the first 2 years, we were working on our policy agenda as it relates to police accountability and mass criminalization. And when I say mass criminalization, I'm talking about the assumption that you are criminal or likely to engage in criminal acts because you belong to a group. And it's either perceived that you belong to a group or you actually belong to a particular group. And so we had a whole debate about body cameras. And so this was before, I believe it was Walter Scott was killed in South Carolina. And there was actually a debate in the organization about whether or not we should advocate for body cameras. And there were people who were like, yeah, body cameras work, we get video, we get evidence, da-da-da-da-da. And other people were like, I'm really watching my tongue, y'all. Usually I cuss a lot. Other people were like, no, forget body cameras. No, we can't use those. Like, that's not, fuck 12. Yeah, I was like, fuck 12.
It's a safe space. We can do it.
Fuck 12. And we landed somewhere in the middle.
Okay.
And I wish we hadn't compromised. Because now there's a deep level of clarity that you can have all the footage in the world, and that does not mean or result in the conviction of a police officer or even an indictment of a police officer. And so I wish we'd had but that's a part of, I think, the regular growth of an organization, figuring out exactly what your positions are. The fourth question is, what are we trying to build? What do we want to build? Right now, we have people arguing all the time about strategies versus tactics, which are two different things, y'all. The tactics are the things you do to carry out a strategy, okay?
Right.
Real simple. Real simple. Okay? And if you know organizers who can explain this stuff in simple ways, they don't know what they're talking about then. They actually don't know what they're doing. So, yeah.
Right. 1 and 2.
Just okay. But that takes it. I've been doing this stuff for like 14 years, and that's not even as long as Mo over there, who's been doing it for decades. Like way longer than I've been doing it. But it takes study. It takes study, and practice. So anyway, being clear about what you want to build. Are you coming in the room to build a 40-year strategy, which we actually need? We need to have 40, 50, 75-year strategies, like for real. Or are you coming in the room to, like, I'll say this often, I get this from the Blackout Collective, turn up because it's a Tuesday. Yeah. Like, just bang on the state because it needs to be banged on, right? Or are you, doing the work because you want to get Andrew Gillum elected in the state of Florida, I'm so excited about that. Yes. I'm so excited about that. All those things matter. Right. And we shouldn't be, like, arguing over the validity of these different strategies. Yes. Like, if your strategy is whatever. Or these strategies.
Well, they're all interconnected.
They're all interconnected. What we should be is, like, talking about the rigor, the discipline it takes. Right. Are they going to get us what we want? In the end, are they going to take us back? Are they going to move us forward? Are they going to transform? Are they going to tinker around the edges? So clarity. And then the last question is, are we ready to win? Are we actually ready to win? And then Gopal Dayanemi, who's an organizer with Movement Generation, says, if you aren't ready to govern, then you aren't ready, you don't deserve to win. If you aren't ready to govern, you don't deserve to win. And I think there's so much in that statement because right now, great, we get people elected into office. To me, I see that as a midterm solution. Electing people who share our interest into office. That is not the final destination. To me, winning is full self-governance on the community level, full self-determination on the community level, us in right relationship with each other and the land that we live on. No elected official is going to give us that.
Right.
No elected official is going to create an environment, a culture of people making decisions that are towards like our collectivity, or like a collectivism, right? They're not going to do that for us.
Yeah.
And so it's all those things, like, are we actually ready to figure out how to provide water for thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, deliver healthcare? Basically, are we ready to do what Cuba was faced with in the aftermath of the revolution? That's, there's a lot to learn there.
Well, that's the real question that you pose for us. And I feel like I love the fact that you have the word mandate for a movement. Like, this is like a clear, like, these are instructions on what we need to do in order to be successful in this. And I want to go to chapter 4 because there are basically 3 commitments that you outline that movement workers need to make part of their own, what would I say? It's part of their mission. Yep. I'm just going to read that quickly so folks can be on board, because I know everybody bought their books and you're going to be reading chapter 4 later, but just to catch everybody up. Okay, so there are 3 collective commitments our movements must take up to regenerate. First one is building many strong leaders. The second one is adopting healthy justice as a core organizing value and practice. And then 3 is combating why can't I read today? Here,
it's
you
all
read
good.
this. You read
Okay,
this
word.
last one.
Combating liberalism with principled struggle.
What she said. There you go.
Okay.
You're giving so many gems and so much like just great work. Can you walk us through what those 3 commitments mean to you and how you activate that in BYP 100 and just in your daily life? Like, what does that mean?
Yeah. So, I said that earlier today. I'm like, this book is gonna get me in trouble because I talk about a lot of Marxist and communist.
You
stuff.
do.
And,
Talk about it.
And
I appreciate
I'm like
it, though.
I think I'm a closeted socialist.
I don't think you closeted
I'm
anymore.
Come
It's in the
out,
book.
I need to come out. I didn't do it. I'm like, wait, how do I write this whole book and not say like some economic, political, whatever?
We'll just call that self-determination.
Yes. So, building many strong leaders, I feel like people should get that. However, I remember Mother Oprah, Lord bless her heart. She hurt my feelings. So I was actually crying. Ooh, I don't know if it was like the moon or what, but I was crying that day when she tweeted and said she was giving $500,000 to the young people in Florida for the March for Our Lives. And not because she gave them money. I wasn't upset. But she said, I haven't seen this like since the Civil Rights Movement or something like that.
Yeah.
And I was like, dang, we've been out here hitting the streets for like the past 6 years. Where you been at?
Right.
I know where she was. She was critiquing us and saying that, where's the leader? Asking us that question. And I'm like, whoa, dang, like you just didn't catch, because we didn't look like what was expected, right? It was a bunch of queer, LGBTQ folks, women, like gender non-conforming, like all those kinds of folks, undocumented people, disabled people, people with disabilities on the front line. Like, I remember in Ferguson, I saw all kinds of people there, and I was only there for a little bit during the uprising. And, people have been putting it all on the line for the past several years. I mean, Joshua Williams is in prison right now, who was a part of the Ferguson uprising. And like, where was she? And so it hurt my little feelings. But it's this desire for us to have a single charismatic leader. And I'm charismatic, okay?
You are.
I own that. And I do the work of, like, I work with a lot of people. And I help to develop a lot of leaders as an organizer. Like, that's my commitment. And so we need really strong leaders. And people misunderstand Ella Baker's quote that strong people don't need strong leaders. She was talking about a single leader. Like, strong people don't need a single leader, right? She was a leader. She wasn't like, I don't believe in strong leaders. She was talking about a very particular context where these single men who were pastors and other faith leaders were out front while the Joanne Robinsons, the Rosa Parks, even the Bayard Rustins, all those folks were quarantined over to the side, right? And so that's the context she was talking about that in. So we actually have to have a real commitment to developing a lot of leaders. And I'm so excited about the new incoming co-directors of BYP 100, Deatra Jackson and Janae Bonsu.
Yes.
Right?
Give us some love.
One of them, I personally trained. And I'm like, so, blame whatever on me. Whatever. And the other is one of the most disciplined and rigorous organizers I've ever seen in my life and met and, been able to work with. And I'm really excited about them. But that's the work we do. That means that BYP 100 doesn't fall apart because I'm not the director anymore.
Right.
That's our work as organizers. If an organizer's your worth, your stock, your value is in how many people you help to develop. That's your job, right?
You got a collective.
Yeah, that is your primary job. The second commitment is adopting healing justice as a core organizing value and practice. So I'm not the person who defined healing justice. Actually, one of the folks, one of our coworkers is in the room, Kara Page, actually is one of the people who defined healing justice. And she was a part of the Kindred Healing Justice Collective. And how they define healing justice is healing justice identifies how we can holistically respond to and intervene on generational trauma and violence, and to bring collective practices that can impact and transform the consequences of oppression on our bodies, hearts, and minds. The two things I want to say about this, or a couple things, is one, there's a lot we can learn from people who work in the recovery and addiction space. The first is about self-work. That NA, that AA, SA, any meeting is going to be there every week. But you got to show up. You got to show up, right? Your sponsor isn't the person who does all the things for you. That's a person who you can call on when you need support, right? Okay. They've been through some things. They have similar experiences, all of that. You got to show up as a person. That space, they create the space. They create the container, the consistency, all those things. You got to show up. And so our movements really need to absolutely commit to healing justice as a major component of our organizing. And two, we have to create, as organizations and as broader movements, containers for people to be able to engage in restorative work, right? And people got to show up. Because one organization can't do all the things you want. And I've seen it happen in our organization and other organizations over and over again. I think we set up mixed expectations about what we can provide. It takes real skill and not just what you wear to be a healer, right?
Talk about it.
There are so many different modalities of healing work. You can be a Reiki practitioner. You can be a massage therapist. You can be a clinical therapist or psychologist. You can be a generative somatics practitioner. So many. You can be a chef, right? You could be there's so many things that are healing modalities. And just like we invest in organizing training, we got to invest in people to actually work on their craft as healers. And so in creating that container, we can't just if there are any folks who believe in praying, you don't just let anybody pray on you or touch you.
Yeah.
And so if you're doing Reiki, oh my gosh, you're doing some serious work on somebody's body. I want you to be prepared for what you're doing and practice in what you're doing. And so we got to take that seriously. And individuals, you have to I wish I could remember the quote about you are not responsible for your oppression, but you're responsible for your own healing. Maybe that was Audre Lorde. I'm not sure. Or June Jordan.
I feel like it's Audre. Yeah.
Audre Lorde. She said everything.
Yeah, she did.
Everything. And so, no, you are not responsible for what happened to you. For the traumatic things, the awful things that happened to you. But if you want to heal, in the word of Queen Beyonce, and it be glorious, you got to do that work. Yeah. Right? And we should all be able to be a part of communities that will help us do that work. Yes. So those are the two things. And then the last one, combating liberalism through principled struggle. This is like where I actually y'all. My editor, the publisher, was like, you need to make a note about Mao Zedong and what he did to people instead of just quoting him. And I was like, well, okay. That's right, that's true. But I pulled directly from some work from Mao's work. I think this is in the Little Red Book, or it might be somewhere else. Yeah, it's in the Little Red Book. And actually, the Black Panthers used to roll around Harlem with the Little Red Book, selling it for fundraisers. Yeah,
I love that.
Yeah, it was back in the day, we used to have a much stronger thread of Marxism and socialism and African socialism in our movements. And so I talk about combating liberalism through principled struggle because it's serious. It's super serious because when we don't act principally, people can die. And then I tell a story of in 1969 when some Black Panther Party members, Bunchy Carter and John Huggins, were killed after some rumors were circulated between the Black Panther Party and the U.S. organization. And these rumors were that someone from the other organization was trying to kill the other. And they both got this letter, and the letter was from COINTELPRO.
Of course.
Right? The feds. And so they in this meeting, I wasn't there, obviously, and I read a lot, talked to some people, and they in this meeting, and it turns up, people turn up, and Carter and Huggins are killed. They're shot and killed because of rumors. How many of you have been on social media and saw people popping off at the gums about something that has happened? And not the fact that they're just talking about what happened, right? It's the peanut gallery that actually makes it worse. Because that person may have a legitimate grievance, for sure, about something. That person can be going through all kinds of things, and that person may or may not be telling all the things that happened.
Right.
And oftentimes, the first person who speaks is the one who's believed. And that may not actually be what happened. I have seen entire people, individuals, and organizations be brought to their knees because of what someone has said on the internet, and they have only told part of the story.
Right.
And so, and many people along the way, what's liberal about that is that we let things fly without saying something, right? And it's hard. I get it. It's hard. And I know that there have been many times where I haven't said something when I should have.
Well, sometimes silence can be misinterpreted as weakness, or or maybe you're guilty of something, and simply you're trying to be professional, or trying to keep things at a distance because you don't want to go into this thing, So it is a whole. The internet is messy. It's like a wonderful and messy place all at once.
It's wild.
Yeah.
And I'm like, most of the people I see turning up on other people, they have each other's phone numbers.
Right.
Or they have, if you can't talk to that person, who are that person's people?
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
You got, I think about this as an abolitionist who I believe that we can live in a world where we deal with conflict, harm, and violence in radically different ways. Without police and without prisons and without punishment. And what does that mean? So you in a relationship.
Pick up the phone.
Yeah, you in a relationship and someone's physically abusive. So you're not just gonna call that person and be like, yo, stop this thing. Who are that person's people? Who is that person's mama?
Right.
Their cousin? Do they belong to a fraternity or sorority? A church, an institution? Who is their supervisor at their job? Who is responsible for this person? That is a possible intervention that doesn't involve the police at all. Because what we've seen all too often is that you're actually they criminalize when you involve the state. And when I say the state, I mean the government and all the tentacles and the extension of the government. And so, what are the systems that we can build? Because as an abolitionist, I believe that we should dismantle these systems, and that we also have a responsibility to build alternatives. And what's happening now is that people get away with a lot of things. They do a lot of horrible things, and their people may not ever know that they did it. The people who can actually hold them accountable, because I can't be held accountable by people I'm not in a relationship with.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I think also, just to tie it back to the book as well, there's a moment where you really talk about, with full transparency, about what happened in terms of like when you had conflict in BYP 100, like when there were things that were uncomfortable, that were still in your beginning stages of growing the organization, and you really lay it all out in the book, and you're like, this and this happened, this is how we handled it, this is what I wish we would have done differently. Like, can you tell us more about that experience? Because I felt, I mean, it was just a level of vulnerability that I was not expecting, and I really did appreciate, because you showed us like the messy parts of it, and how it concluded in a way that in my mind felt like resolution.
So I don't even know if I've adequately prepared myself to talk about this, like, because I know it's gonna keep coming up, but I wrote it, so I have to talk about it, and it doesn't get easier talking about it. It's been almost 3 years since we received a report, and there's a trigger warning for sexual assault, sexual violence. So if you need to take care of yourself, please do. But we received a report from a young Black woman that one of our leaders, our member leaders, sexually assaulted her maybe 2 or 3 years before our organization even existed. But this was in a moment where this person was like super visible, because they'd just been kidnapped by the Chicago Police Department. And their name was all over the news. And so I think it was triggering for her to see those things, and triggering for her to see people saying, he's a good guy, he free him, and all those other things. And so we were in a moment, and I talk about it in the book from my perspective, not from anybody else's. I can't tell you what it felt like for other people. There is a full write-up on the internet about the whole process, because there was a year-long transformative justice process with all involved people, and there was a choice by the survivor to do a transformative justice process, and a choice by our member leader to engage in that process and make it known publicly. And in the midst of all of this stuff, we were dragged. Like, the people in the organization who didn't do the thing, like the three of the Black women who were dealing with the whole thing, including myself, are survivors of sexual violence, were dragged on the internet saying, what are y'all doing? You don't know what you're doing. And people didn't necessarily know it was us who were, the three of us, and there were other folks who were involved in dealing with the situation. But the organization was, like, in many ways, just dragged for filth, based on, like, a lot of assumptions. And this is one thing about combating liberalism, and one thing that Mal says, and also Emil Cabral, a lot of folks, no investigation, no right to speak. And so a lot of people were not investigating what happened, but were speaking a lot. And it was hurtful. It hurt a lot. Because it was this thing that as Black women, and there was one Black man also from our organization who was a part of managing the whole process and figuring it out, who we didn't do it. And we were all, like, still, like, deciding to take a level of responsibility, because this was our member, and we received this letter from this young Black woman who we have a politic, a belief. We have a politic that we say we believe in. We say we trust Black women. We say that we are about the business of believing people who have experienced sexual violence. So the time comes, what you gonna do? What you gonna do? And I question my own values throughout the entire thing. And a lot of people use our organizational example for what they should do, and I want to be real clear that we made a lot of mistakes along the way, and there are things that I wish we would have done differently. And it is about making a choice to dig into something and commit to it, and also make structural changes. We started our Healing and Safety Council, which is our self-governing body on dealing with conflict and harm and violence in our organization. And we're actually at a juncture where we even starting that all over again.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Because we have a commitment to figuring this thing out. And that's the work, right? If you're going to be about the business of abolition, you have to be willing to experiment. You have to be willing to admit when you fuck up. And when you need to do things differently. And also lean on people who I'm going to actually be in conversation with Miriam Kaba tomorrow at the Strand, who was one of the people who helped us through that whole process. So, like, people who have more experience, because we didn't know everything. We didn't know anything, frankly. And we had to like lean on community to help us and
Well,
guide us through the
I
situation.
was just so impressed with just the transparency and the level, you said it best, of commitment to working through the problem, where there could have been a point where you ignored it or said he's no longer with our organization and seen, because that's what a lot of people do. He's not affiliated with us anymore. That's the end. But you really went through the experience, and it was transformative.
I think for the people involved, that's my understanding. When you read the public account, which folks should definitely do that, there is a level of like recognition of like some level of transformation that happened. And I just think it's really best to read their words, because I don't want to mess it up, and I'm not trying to get cussed out for saying something that happened. I can only speak from what happened, what I experienced directly from in that experience.
I know we're like running tight on time, but I really want you to talk about the Chicago model. You're from Chicago through and through, and I have a lot of friends from undergraduate from Chicago, and they have your same radiance, and they like Chicago is it, you know? So can you talk about these, what I learned from reading your book, which is like these very critical points in movement building that really started and manifested in Chicago and have spread out. And when you wrote out all these things, I was like, oh yeah, this makes sense. The Great Migration, all these things make complete sense. But you've done it in a way where you like can clearly see the patterns. If you could just share that with us, that'd be great.
So no one's worse about talking about their city or a native than a native New Yorker, right? Than a native Chicagoan. It's like we're like neck and neck. You need a native New Yorker and a native Chicagoan walk in the bar,
turned up,
and they just talk about themselves. That's what happens. And so, we have a lot to brag about in our dear city, and I truly believe that, and it's like brag about, recognize. There's also a lot of things I'm not proud of about the city. We have a trash mayor. He's horrible. We have a lot of awful politicians. We do have some good folks like Maria Haddon, who's running for city council, and 49 is one of our members. We have Amara Inyaya, who's also running for mayor of Chicago. So there's some bright spots in there, and more people who are some bright spots. So there's a lot that, I'm not proud of. I'm also not proud of, like, how many of our people are killed, because as a result of the violence that's deeply connected to the divestments we've had in our communities, like the economic and physical and mental depression of our people in the city. And it's something that's not brand new. And so I talk about in the book how, and this is totally like some native Chicagoan stuff, that like at so many points, I actually say at every point, in the Black radical tradition, or so like almost every, you can look at what was happening in Chicago as a critical contribution to the Black radical tradition. And it was actually in the 1930s. In the 1930s, Black communists, because at the height of the Communist Party in the U.S., there were actually more Black communists in Chicago than in New York City. It's gonna be fun to talk about. People don't talk about it as much. Michael Dawson's work, Blacks in and Out of the Left, he talks about a lot of like the Black communist Marxist tradition in Chicago. And in the 1930s, it's said that they were able to mobilize 5,000 people in less than 30 minutes to stop an eviction.
Wow.
There was no internet. I don't know if there were phones or something. Maybe you had to like dial up.
Telegram.
Yeah, up the phone. But this is what they were, and these were Black communists, y'all. And we know the Communist Party at that time was also trash towards Black people. It had many reasons why we, like Black folks, all that history, that's a whole nother thing. But we have that. We won the very first reparations ordinance for Black folks, predominantly Black folks, who were survivors of police torture.
Wow.
And that was a long, long struggle that started well before BYP 100 even was a twinkle in any of our eyes. Right. John Burge was a police commander in the Chicago Police Department. He and the people he was over, or people under his command, tortured well over 100 people, mostly men, including some women, mostly Black men, over a period of, I want to say decades, but don't quote me on that part. And as a result of the organizing that people did, right, over decades, I can say that for certain, including people who were on death row because of forced confessions after Burgess torture. I met some people who are in Stateville prison right now who have forced confessions due to torture under Burge and the people under his command. They won this campaign, the very first reparations ordinance, where $5.5 million were set aside for torture survivors and their families. They got a formal apology from the Chicago police. And all students in the 8th and 10th grade in Chicago public schools are required to receive a history lesson about this.
Yeah.
And they also are opening a community center on the south side of Chicago. Yeah. So it was an abolitionist campaign in so many ways that took a long time to win. And we came in towards the end, and like people talked about how young folks from our organization, Asada's Daughters, We Charge Genocide, BLM Chicago, a whole bunch of folks, Let Us Breathe, like literally like put new like life into the campaign in this era of movement. And it was a victory for the survivors of torture and also for our community. And that happened in Chicago. Yeah. We ousted Anita Alvarez, our prosecutor, in 2016. It was a citywide coalition. People who were liberals, progressives, moderates, radicals, even some anarchists were a part of this effort, okay? It was huge. And what else have we done? I can talk about it all day. But we've just done a lot of stuff. And what's important about the Chicago model is that it's deeply intergenerational. Like, I organized alongside Dr. Barbara Ransby, who also organized the Black Radical Congress, right? Has been doing this for a long time. And we organize alongside middle school students, you know? And so students from the Village Leadership Academy who have organized their own actions, and we show up to their actions, you know? So it's deeply intergenerational. It also includes a lot of institutions. I mean, y'all, Mosque Miriam is in Chicago, and the Nation of Islam is still a force in Chicago. We have large Christian churches. We have the labor unions. We have huge labor unions in the city. So to organize in Chicago means multiple institutions and having to navigate multiple institutions. It also means organizing locally, but being connected globally. And so Rasmia O'Day, who was deported by this country, who's Palestinian and has been engaged in the Palestinian liberation movement maybe her entire life, most of her life, is also connected to other folks like Camille O'Day and other like Palestinian liberation fighters. And they're deeply embedded in Black liberation movement and migrant justice and immigrant justice in the city of Chicago. And so people are doing this global work connected to global struggles, and it's localized. So it's all those things. And it's hard, y'all. It's hard. And it comes at a cost. Like, the past several years have been nonstop for us. Over and over again. We do actions in Chicago winter. Right? Like, we do. I mean, the only people who come, like, who do it harder than we do are the folks in Minnesota. Like, they go in. I'm like, y'all are serious. They did an occupation in the dead of the winter. You know, like, they outside the police department in Minnesota, Minneapolis specifically. And I'm like, y'all go hard. And so, you know, it's all those things, and there's relationships fractured. Right. People burnt out. It costs both money, and it also costs, like, a lot of human energy to do this work. And so I think we're in recovery phase now as an organizing community in Chicago. And, you know, there's still things that happen and come up. But it was rough for a moment, especially after the Anita Alvarez campaign to oust her. There were a lot of fractures. I think that people are, and I actually credit people like Barbara Ransby as one of the people who's been, like, doing the quilting that she will talk about to pull people back together in a way so that we can get back to the business that we need to do.
What do you think you're learning from like elders like Barbara or Dr. Ramsey, and or just like the inspiration you get from Ella Baker or Harriet Tubman? Like, what do you think is that thing that quilts people back together?
Yeah. So, for me, I'm digging more and more into this, but I see that our common ground, even in our organization, is reverence and respect for our ancestors.
Yeah.
Like, if we can't agree on anything else when it comes to faith or spirituality, like there's a deep like willingness and excitement over honoring our ancestors, recognizing who we come from, our lineage. And it's something that just connects us deeply. Knowing that whether or not I'm in Harriet Tubman's bloodline or in Marsha P. Johnson's bloodline, whether or not that's a thing, knowing that like I come from people who like started the Stonewall Rebellion, that's dope.
It is. I mean, I feel like that is such an affirmation. With the work that I do as well, feels like it is this intergenerational calling back. You know, like seeing yourself, and even in this book too, you reference all the fiction and the things that you read that like brought you to this place. I you know what, I've been talking a lot, and I want to make space for folks in the room to answer, to ask questions. So, you know, we're going to use our big people voices, just project, stand up if y'all have a question. Does anyone have a question? Don't be shy. Okay.
Get like a rush of adrenaline when I do things like this. So that's what you're seeing right now. What you're sensing. And also like there are just people in the room, like the energy feels good. And that's a part of what keeps me going. My relationships, my connections to people. And just knowing that, not having like the arrogance to think that I'm the first to do it or the last to do it. And they're like, my people, like, ended slavery in this country. I like to believe that my people also, like started and won the Haitian Revolution. Like, my people made it from the South up north, and some of my people stayed in the South and didn't migrate north for whatever reason. And so I think it's just like knowing that, and also having people in my lives. And my partner is Mary Hooks, and she's in the conclusion of the book. So hope that works out. We stay together for a while. She's all up and through this book, you know. It will. We're good. And so she is one of the best organizers I know. She's like, also, you know, she doesn't talk trash about people. This is amazing. She's one of the most principled people I know. And I like look up to her as an organizer, and like knowing that, you know, she's like, this is the work, babe. This is the work. I'm like, why are you on the phone? Why are you on the phone with somebody at 10 o'clock? Not when I'm there, when I'm not there. Why are you on the phone with somebody at 10 o'clock talking about, this is the work, babe. This is the work. And so just knowing these like super committed people around me makes a world of a difference. And then also, like, I think about my niece. My niece is 7. She's gonna be 8 this year in a couple months. And I had her come to our national convening. It was our 5th anniversary and our 3rd national convening in Chicago last month. And we were in my office, and somebody said something about black. She's also reading. I think she read something. She's like, I'm not black. She's 7. She doesn't think about that stuff yet. She's like, I'm not black, I'm brown. We were taking our group picture a couple days later, singing the song I Love Being Black. And she was singing a song, and I almost lost it. because like just seeing her develop her political consciousness in that particular moment and around all these other kids, like that's what this work is for.
Right.
That's what the work is about. And because I said she needed to come to this convening so she could get some politics. Like that was my own. Like she need to get some politics. It's time for it to happen. And her like being affirmed in that space and being around other little babies, little children. Because movement kids, as my friend Alexis says, they're different. They take special attention, special care, and that keeps me going. And we have the person up there. Oh yeah, you can go. Yeah.
Thank you. One of the things that I've been thinking about a lot in Black liberation and Black feminist work in general is how to make movements more accessible. And so I'm interested at what point in the book or just in your activism in your life does accessibility come into the picture? And by that I mean like mental, emotional,
I was gonna ask that.
and people who have different
Yeah.
abilities physically.
Yeah. So I appreciate your clarification because I think oftentimes people just say the word accessibility, but they're not specific about what they mean, right? Because there's so many different needs or things that will make things more available to people, more open to people, right? I know it's in New York, I always struggle with the fact that a lot of spaces aren't wheelchair accessible. And I'm like, I don't use a wheelchair, but I always notice it. And I'm like, dang, this is wild. You're like, you can't go get your nails done because you can't get in there. You know, and you should be able to have cute nails if you were to wheel, you know what I'm saying? And so they're just wild to me. So I'm thinking about those things. And so it's things that's basic. Just thinking about where we have meetings and if they're physically accessible to people.
Right.
Like that's just, we shouldn't like get any coins or cookies because we're in a physically accessible space, you know? But that's something that we should be doing. I think also an edge for us, or both organizationally and I think in this current iteration of movement, and it's not all organizations by any means, but it's language accessibility, meaning like foreign language or non-English speaking folk or folk English is just not your first language. There are organizations like the National Domestic Workers Alliance. They do an amazing job with language justice. Southerners on New Ground. They do an amazing job around language justice. So I think that's one thing. Like a lot of Black folks, English is not their first language. And so one thing that I'm really interested in doing in the next phase of my life is doing some projects around having monolingual Black activists who are English monolingual learn other languages. Because it would really enhance our work with Black people and people who aren't Black who speak other languages. I think the other thing, other levels of accessibility I have less clarity around, particularly with folks who, I think many people in our organization have various mental health issues. I've dealt with depression over the years, and that's included in that, right? And so what does it mean to organize Black people who come from hold generational trauma and also hold like the trauma from things that have happened to them or things that they have viewed, right? Because you can be like when you watch those videos of our people being gunned down, or like I think it was Natasha McKinnon, what they did to her, Natasha McKenna, what they did to her, or just seeing Sandra Bland's photo. You can be traumatized from that. And so I don't think that we create organizations that look for people who are perfect, or people who have like I don't even know if there's such a thing as A1 mental health or mental wellness. And it's important for us to recognize when we're actually not able to show up as the self that we want to show up as, right? And that in organizations, I've seen it happen in our organization, where people are in mental health crisis and the folks around them want to help, but they actually are not equipped to help. Like if you don't know how to deal with that, that takes training, and you wouldn't know how to deal with that if it was one of your family members either. And so it's just all those things that I think we have to address accessibility, not just on the organizational level, but on the community level, particularly when it comes to mental wellness, because we cannot figure that out on our own, just as single organizations. We need a lot more like folks who are trained social workers, trained clinicians, people who know how to do crisis response, all the people who are trained in like rape crisis intervention. We need y'all, like in movement organizations, because y'all know stuff that a lot of us don't know. You know, if you're not currently present, and that's not to say that we don't have those folks. I just think we need a lot more. So, yeah.
So I heard you speak a couple years ago, and you mentioned that coalition building was something that you were really like passionate about,
Oh.
and it's what got me into coalition building.
Oh.
And I was wondering if you're still passionate about it, and if that pops up in the book at all, and sort of what your thoughts are on coalition building, like 3-4 years later.
Wow, that was that long ago that you heard me talk about that.
The Philly Black Radicals.
Oh, I remember that. Okay. So, coalition building. You know, I must have been real optimistic back in the day. You call me early. It's necessary. It's necessary, right? No one organization can like win a thing on its own. At least not a structural change. Like I don't see that happening, right? BYP 100, we don't win stuff on our own. I don't know of a campaign that we run or effort that we do that it doesn't include other people. If we are doing it, it's probably not effective, honestly. And it can be difficult when you have a set of politics that are vastly different from other organizations. And so for us, we actually have a moment like that right now that I'm not involved in. I'm like really intentionally trying not to be involved in, is around the trial of the police officer who killed Laquan McDonald. And his trial starts next week. And one of the demands is calling for him to be convicted. And we're an abolitionist organization. And so do we say, no, we ain't joining this coalition because we don't agree politically with this demand? Or do we figure out how to work within this thing? Because it matters to people. It matters to Laquan's family, Laquan's community. And how do we show up in those things, in those particular moments? And so it's not a real option to say we're not going to show up, because of this one thing. And we still have to wrestle. We still have to wrestle with that contradiction. And that's contradiction is a natural part of coalition building. You're going to have contradictions. It's an automatic contradiction if we're sitting at a table with a labor union and you're an anti-capitalist organization, because most labor unions are capitalists. They're not looking to dismantle the economy as it is, right? There are some that are anti-capitalist. The major ones, the big ones, are capitalists. And so how do you, and we work with labor unions, and you just have to live within that contradiction. And I learned a lot of that actually through Black Organizer for Leadership and Dignity, BOLD. There's also a bunch of boulders in the room. And we do like these like somatic exercises with contradictions. And have you heard of BOLD? You should look up BOLD Organizing. And there's some trainings. Amanla is an organizer training. There's also a director training. You need to check it out. And we do like physical things, because one of the teachings is that how you show up in your body is how you show up in the work and how you show up in the world. And so the contradiction practice to me is one of the most important ones, because you have to go back to that over and over and over again as an organizer. So yeah.
Do you have any? Well, if there's not any other questions, does anyone have a question? Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, so I have a question about like the need that you talked about for organizing for 40, 60, 70-year plans.
Yeah.
In an age where there is clearly an urgency for some pressing issues now.
Yes.
And I'm wondering how one perhaps goes about identifying leaders equipped for and have the capacity for that 40, 50, 60-year plan building in an age where there's clearly just a lot of stuff that we should be working on now.
Absolutely. That's a great question. And it's real, like the urgency of now. The urgency of now creates containers for people to mobilize and to show up, and new people to show up, right? That haven't been a part of movement. And there's going to be, I know there's going to be a surge of volunteers, members of Dream Defenders, the new Florida Majority, all these places, like these organizations in Florida because of this particular moment, right? But what's important is that they've been moving a strategy in Florida for over a decade.
Right.
And it's in recognition that you build a long-term strategy and it has to have multiple entry points for people, right? Over a time span. And if we're going to build a 40, 75-year strategy, that means that everybody might not know that it's a 75-year strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay. But we have to, like, what are going to be the flashpoints, the opportunities, the openings, all that stuff for people to join this thing that may or may not even have a name, right? But know that Republicans and conservatives have had 40, 50, 75-year strategies.
Right.
They have had those strategies. And so it's never too late to build one of those strategies for folks who are concerned with collective liberation. We can do that right now. We can do, like, there are people working on that now. And I think that as far as to like who can do those things, I think there's going to be people who come in and out along the way, right? And somebody got to do it. Like there has to be a group of people who sit in a room and they talk about, let's build this 40, 50, 75-year strategy, right? And if they're effective organizers, right, people will come into that. Right? People will come into it. People will see something that's bigger than themselves as individuals, and something that, you know, they can be in for the long haul, as Miles Horton, Highlander, would say, the long haul. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I guess the last question I want you to share with folks is just anyone picking up your book, what do you want them to take away?
Mm-hmm. There's a lot that I want folks to take away. And it's funny, this is a short book, y'all. I don't know how I packed this much into one book. But I managed to do it because I wanted to write a short book. I wanted to write, I was actually a little surprised when the publisher said this needs to be a hardcover book because it's a serious book and people need to take it seriously, so it needs to be hardcover. And so I'm happy that it's hardcover. But I was like, I want to write a book that people can just throw in their book bag. They can read on the bus, they can read on the train, they can take it places. Something that wasn't like super long, that they could digest, and like I mean I wrote it or whatever, so I can read it in like an hour or two. Like I can just go through it.
Yeah.
I read it so many times, and yeah, I want people to take away a lot of ideas that they then have a lot of questions about, and that you do your own investigation. All right, do your own investigation, and the other job of an organizer, I talked about leadership development. The other job of an organizer is to agitate people around ideas and actions. And I want you to be agitated by this. I want you to be like, what is she talking about? This is wild. Whoa. Where did this come from? Or, nah, girl, you wild. I don't agree with you. This is whack. I want people to do that and argue about it with their friends. I want people to argue about it. You know, you can tweet me or like drop a note on my Facebook page or Instagram or something and be like, yo, you said this on such and such page. What did you mean? Or this is whack or such, you know, I just disagree. And that's political struggle. Right. And it's struggling for the sake, I want it to be struggling for the sake of advancing the work that we're doing, right? And that's continuing on what Tanya Lee taught us about principle struggle, is we don't struggle for the sake of just struggling. We struggle for the sake of moving our work forward.
Yes.
We struggle for the sake of transformation. Yes. That's what we should be doing this for. And so I want people to struggle with this. Yes. And I also want folks who are doing this work to write your own books. Yes. I want more people to write, right? We need a canon. We need a whole canon. We got Patrice's book, Patrice Culler's book, her memoir, When They Call You a Terrorist. We got Darnell Moore's book, right? No Ashes in the Fire. We need more books. I'm not everybody's books though. And I'll just
leave it there.
Leave it there.
And now she will sign her book.
Yes.
So thank you so much. This
Thank
is just